between, because we understand that problem up to some threshold. Problem with the Carrington event is it's probably 10 times above the threshold that we've planned for.
Is there any way, if you got word of a solar event like this, and I guess we have 10 or 11 minutes before we sort of find out, is there anything you can do with your own stuff, like throw a bunch of tinfoil over your computer? Or and are there resources that where people could get, any sort of alert or updates on how active the, I mean, obviously there's some NOAA and stuff like that.
Yeah. So the forecasting and response question is one that policymakers and scientists are both wrestling with. It's like, all right, why should we throw a whole bunch of money at use case physicists when you're not going to be able to do anything about it? So we actually have longer than 8 minutes, which is the speed of light time from the sun, because even at thousands of kilometers per second, it takes longer for the solar wind to get to the Earth. So we would have some warning about what's going on the sun. Well, now I can use we in all kinds of layers, including Los Alamos, the US, and the world have a satellite called ACE that sits at the gravitational midpoint between the sun and the Earth, which is about 200 Earth radii towards the sun. That gives us about an hour warning of knowing what the solar wind that's going to hit the Earth. Our warning is not enough to do very much. It's enough. So some of the forecasting that's done right now, if it looks like it's going to be dangerous space weather conditions in general, I'm not talking Carrington event, but launches, satellite launches will be delayed, airline flights will be diverted, people will delay scheduled maintenance on electrical transmission systems. You can say, well, if it costs a lot of money to shut down a power system, it doesn't cost a lot of money to wait to do a transformer upgrade for a week. So there are things that we can do, but FEMA has, and this has just happened in the last, I'd say 5 years, FEMA has gotten much more interested in how would they respond if there was a Carrington level in that. What does it mean in terms of, so hospitals are required to have, I think it's 24 or 36 hours worth of reserve power generation. If your power grid is down for longer than that, what starts happening? Your communication systems, if you're relying on cell phones and stuff. I mean, we've seen this even with hurricanes and floods, and imagine no electricity. Now, that said, I do want to say that one of my friends, a guy named Dan Baker, who's worked on a lot of these National Academy studies that do a little bit of the chicken little sky is falling, worst case scenario kind of thing. I asked him how much food he's stockpiling. And not only is he not stockpiling food, but he doesn't even have solar panels on his house. On the flip side, when I installed solar panels on my house, I made sure that it would work without the grid, because somebody was asking what's the probability. I think it cost me $200 extra to get that inverter instead of the other one. So $200 is a good investment that I'll be able to charge my cell phone when you all won't. Now it won't work.
There's nobody to talk to.
But I'll still be able to play Tetris.
Would it damage the solar panel? That's what I was thinking.
No. Because it's not really about light. It's not that things are that much brighter. This is one flare that Carrington saw. Nobody's ever seen a visible light flare like that from the ground since. It was huge. And so it's not a lot more light. It's It's the energy that's carried in this plasma from the solar wind out, coupling into our bubble of magnetosphere. Our little, you can think of it like our little protective force field is our magnetic field. And the more energy that's coupled into there, the more electrical currents are being driven through the system. And so it affects just, so I was going to get into the complicated thing about how is your solar panel connected to the electrical power grid and could it short it out and that sort of thing. But solar panels are, I've just learned this because I just put on solar panels, they isolate themselves from the grid when the voltages get different so that if the power goes down and somebody needs to come and fix the power in your neighborhood, your solar panels aren't electrocuting them.
So can we have one more question, and actually right over there, this gentleman in the center, he's been waiting.
Oh, sorry, yes.
I'm trying to settle an argument with the French, who is claiming that the solar influx to the surface, the heat waves, is a larger cause of our warming trend than carbon dioxide. So how much does that influx vary in what causes it?
So there have been people that have tried to study that based on proxies. There are parts of the solar spectrum that vary a lot, and there's parts of the solar spectrum that hardly vary at all. And the parts that warm the Earth are extremely constant to the precision that we can measure them. The X-ray fluxes, the EUV fluxes, the stuff that is absorbed by our atmosphere, that varies. But the case for solar variability influencing our climate. So when I was growing up, there was a guy named Jack Eddy who did all kinds of studies about things. Tree rings had this 11-year cycle. There were sedimentation events that looked like they had an 11-year cycle. The sunspot cycle. There were all kinds of things that looked like they had 11-year cycles. And that's suggestive that this 11-year sunspot cycle may have some influence on climate. But people have worked very, very hard to try and establish that physical connection. So far, without success. There are a few studies out there, but even there, I know one of the guys that's one of the proponents of that, and even he would say it's very circumstantial. We don't really know. Some people would like to know because if there was that link to climate, if nothing else, it would mean that I wouldn't have to write grants for the rest of my life. But that's a very important and interesting question. So far, well, one thing I'll say for certain, we know for certain that the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is a much, much larger effect than solar variability.
So I just want to say Jeff will be speaking at a Frontiers in Science lecture. Actually, there's 3 of them. It's July 24th, 26th, and 28th.
And I'll have pictures, so you don't have to just watch me waving.
You'll see us waving hands, I'm sure. The 24th is in Santa Fe.
Correct.
The 26th is in Los Alamos.
But it will be in a different location. It will be at Crossroads Bible Church because the high school's undergoing renovation.
Right. And the 28th will be down in Albuquerque at the Dinah Theater at the New Mexico Museum of Natural History and Science. Santa Fe is going to be at the James A. Little Theater. Right. So go watch it because this was really interesting. Jeff, thanks so much.